My wife was an office worker at my client's company. At the time, being young, I was drawn to her quiet demeanor. I approached her fervently, and we started dating. 2 years later, I went to her parents' home to seek their approval for our marriage. There, her father unexpectedly suggested that we live with them. Originally from a rural island, I moved to the city for college and fell in love with a small town during my studies. After graduation, I obtained a professional license and started my own practice in the town. Believing that it's essential to be part of the community, I actively participated in the local homeowners association, night paroles, local festivals, and other events. This helped me build a network of trust, and, as a result, secure a steady income. It was only because my earning had become stable that I could muster the courage to marry my wife. Therefore, even though my in-laws' place is only an hour and a half away by train, I couldn't leave here, where I was working. Despite explaining this multiple times, my father-in-law persistently pushed us to move in with them. Being a former civil servant, he started saying that he could use his connections to help me find a job. Although I appreciated the offer, I wanted to prioritize taking care of my current clients. I insisted on this for several hours. Finally, I disclosed my current income to my father-in-law and explained that without the relationships I had built so far, I wouldn't be where I am today. And if I were able to expand my business in the future and establish it in their area, I wouldn't mind moving in. Eventually, my father-in-law grudgingly agreed. During this whole discussion, everyone except my father-in-law was as silent as the air. No one interrupted the conversation, and my mother-in-law brought tea a few times. My sister-in-law was there at first, but had to leave midway due to work. After getting married, for convenience, I bought a condo near the station, about a 20-minute walk away from my office. My wife, whom we'll call Emily, said she wanted to continue working, and stayed as an office worker. However, after about a year, she suddenly quit her job to get her own professional license, saying she wanted to help me with my business. The exam was tough, but I could see her determination, and I thought it would be better if we could do it as a couple, so I agreed and let her attend a vocational school. However, she almost abandoned household chores while she was studying. Although I let that slide, our relationship temporarily turned tense. Within less than a year, Emily struggled to keep up with her classes and became a stay-at-home wife. She seemed calmer than when she was studying, and our relationship became better again. At one point, I thought it was a marital crisis, so I expressed my love for Emily even more and worked harder. Eventually, Emily became pregnant and gave birth to twin sons, but she began to act strangely from since then. On my days off from work, she would leave the kids and go back to her family's home by herself. At first, she said she wanted to take a break from parenting, and since both of them had started drinking milk formula, and not just breast milk, I was able to take care of them. So I agreed. We had many talks about this, but my wife said she just couldn't tend to 2 kids at once, and since they're boys, she expected me to parent them. I couldn't quite agree, but for the sake of our children, I relocated my office to a closer location and converted it to an office with kids' playroom. We've been visiting my in-laws about once a month, but the last time we went too, my in-laws just wouldn't let us leave. I turned down drinks, telling them that I was driving, but they still served me beer, calling it tea. I could tell from the smell right away, so I didn't drink a sip. By the time our children were 3 to 4 years old, they weren't attached to Emily at all and stuck to me instead. Eventually, Emily began to visit my in-laws, even on weekdays, and at times, she would even spend a week or 2 at their place and not come back. When it started to interfere with my work, I consulted with Emily's family, but the talks with Emily's mother didn't go anywhere because Emily herself wanted to be there. Emily's father didn't answer the phone, So when Emily hadn't come back for a week, I decided to leave my children at daycare and went to my in-laws' place. When I got to their place, I could hear a loud argument even from outside. It seemed that my father-in-law and sister-in-law were yelling at each other. Hesitating a bit, I killed time at a nearby convenience store, and when I visited again, the voices had quieted down, so I rang the doorbell at my in-laws' home. The front door opened, and Emily's sister came out right away, held back by Emily's father, with Emily's mother and Emily just watching. Emily's sister said to me, "Let's go out, I'll tell you everything." To which my father-in-law said to me, "What are you talking about? Come in quickly!" However, Emily's sister and my father-in-law were having a fierce argument at the entrance, so I couldn't enter their place. During a heated argument, it seems a neighbor called the cops, and the police arrived to cool things down. We ended up talking at their place. According to my father-in-law, "Emily constantly being at her parents' house is your fault. Don't listen to your sister-in-law, Susan. She's crazy." But Susan snickered and said, "You've been deceiving Frank from the start, haven't you?" But every time Susan tried to talk, my father-in-law would interrupt and make a fuss, so we couldn't really have a proper conversation. Even when I tried to get Emily to join in, she remained silent. This was going nowhere, so I asked to talk to everyone individually on a later date. To this, my father-in-law made an unbelievable accusation. "You're planning to have an affair with Susan, aren't you?" Upon hearing this, Susan stood up and said, "Fine, that's enough. I'm leaving this house. Be prepared to cut ties with me." Then she walked out of the room. No one else followed her, but I followed her to the door. Susan, with a serious look on her face, handed me a small envelope and urged me to go back inside. After tucking the envelope inside my jacket, I went back to the room where my father-in-law began again. "Looks suspicious, ain't it? You better move in here quickly." I myself was running out of time, and I had to pick up my kids, so I calmly said, "We've already discussed this before we got married. I don't have Susan's number, and I only meet her here. It's getting late, so I'm taking Emily home today." Then I promptly had Emily gather her things, and we headed home. In the car on our way home, I talked with Emily, but she kept repeating, "The kids don't like me. I don't understand boys. I'm useless." Since I still loved Emily, I told her, "Stay with the kids as much as you can. Raise them in your own way, and I want you to be by my side." We picked up our kids from the daycare and went home. Emily cooked dinner, and we all ate together. Emily's cooking skills had declined, but it was still better than mine, and the kids seemed happy eating it. After dinner, unusually, the kids clung to Emily, and Emily smiled and played with them until they all fell asleep together. I had work to do for tomorrow, so I went to my office to organize some documents. That's when I remembered the envelope Susan had given me. Inside was a USB drive. When I checked it on my office PC, it contained text and audio files. The text file was a summary of my father-in-law's living together plan. Knowing that I was self-employed and earning reasonably well compared to my peers, Emily's father planned to have me move in and work from home, and have me contribute my earnings to them. Despite the initial disagreements when we first met, my father-in-law seemingly believed we would eventually agree to live together, and had even bought a luxury car on loan. However, he saw no signs of Emily and I moving in, so Emily's father had the idea to get Emily a professional license, but her failing the exam thwarted his plan. Still, Emily's father couldn't give up on my income. After Emily gave birth, he came up with a plan to take Emily away from me and manipulated her to get her on his side. Since there was still no sign of us moving in, my father-in-law thought that if he could push the kids onto me, even on weekdays, we would have to rely on them. However, I had set up a childcare room in my office. The next step, apparently, was to keep my wife Emily at home, waiting for me to buckle under the pressure and suggest we live together. The voice file recorded my father-in-law bragging to Emily, Emily's mother, and Emily's sister about the plan, as well as insults towards me and Emily when things went wrong. Emily's mother accepting this, Emily agreeing, and threatened to Emily's sister when she tried to intervene. There were also commands telling Emily to get her hands on my money and to bring that money over, to which Emily only responded with, "Understood." But Emily's sister's opposition was also recorded. Lastly, there was a separate message from Emily's sister, and there was something shocking written there. Apparently, in that house, if they stood up against their father, he would punish them by starvation and economic abuse. Emily's sister often stood up to such a father, and every time she did, she received unthinkable harassment, such as being denied meals and not being given lunch money. Emily, who grew up seeing this, obediently obeyed her father. To stand up to her father, Emily's sister had been learning judo from the upper grades of elementary school. Of course, Emily's father didn't provide the money, but because she was good at it, a police officer relative allowed her to go to the police station dojo. When Emily's sister was in her first year of high school, she was almost assaulted by Emily's father, of course, in a sexual way. But Emily's sister, who had been training, fended off Emily's father, and it seems there was never another attack after that. However, the way Emily's father looked at and behaved towards Emily was strange, so Emily's sister suggested Emily learn judo as well. But Emily gave up as her parents were against it. After graduating high school, Emily's sister got a job and saved as much money as possible. The plan was to eventually take Emily and run away from their parents' house. But Emily, who was raised too obediently, didn't know how to stand up for herself. I have a feeling Emily's been assaulted by my father-in-law when she was in high school, but there's no evidence. When Susan was at home, Emily would cling to her. So when Emily one day told her sister that she had someone she liked and had been asked out, Susan was truly surprised. At first, Susan would secretly watch them on dates. If he turned out to be a weird guy, she was ready to rescue Emily right away. When my father-in-law proposed the cohabitation plan, she thought I would be alright because I had strongly refused. But after seeing Emily's father's obsession, Emily's sister thought it would be best to leave some evidence for the future. Now, Emily might be assaulted by our father, Susan felt, and she wants me to help Emily as soon as possible. She is sure she can protect herself, so she only wants me to worry about Emily. If I still couldn't trust her, she had written instructions to call her work number from a public phone using an alias. Although I did trust her, I had some questions and needed to confirm a few things, so I called a few days later. Susan provided a few more details. The reason she told me to call from a public phone with an alias was because she suspected there might already be a wiretap in the office. The alias was also taken into account in case I didn't call from a public phone. And then I was told to take a moment, gather my thoughts, and get back in touch once I was ready. Emily stopped mentioning wanting to go back to her parents' home and started staying at our place. We started having little conversations gradually, bit by bit. A week after the upheaval, I came home to find Emily and our sons genuinely laughing together. It was the first time I'd seen a smile on Emily's face. I couldn't help but burst into tears. That night, Emily made a confession. She opened up about her past, her inability to defy her father, how her sister had always been there to protect her, and the times she was assaulted. Her sister shielded her whenever she was around, but her father took advantage of the times when she wasn't. She had believed that she couldn't defy her father, She was scared of men, but strangely enough, I was an exception. When I confessed my feelings to her, she was genuinely happy, albeit with complex emotions. But with the support of Emily's sister, she was truly happy to be in a relationship. Around that time, her father was often out of town due to work, so there were fewer opportunities for him to assault her. However, when his assignment ended and he returned home, it was pure terror for Emily. When I proposed to her during this time, she felt like she had no choice but to cling to me. She was taken aback when her father suggested that we live together during our first meeting, but she decided to follow me when I strongly objected. Our marriage was a bliss, until her father insisted that she get a certification. He even threatened to reveal her past to me if she didn't comply. She had no choice but to comply, so she tried her best, but it wasn't enough. Still, she was relieved that she didn't have to go back to her parents' home. Life with me was simply delightful. She was genuinely happy when she became pregnant and we had twins. Initially, Emily's father seemed fond of his grandchildren, which put us at ease. We thought he had changed. But Emily's father hadn't changed after all. He began to separate Emily from me and our children. She was yelled at, threatened, and forced to return every weekend. Eventually, Susan moved back to her parents' home, probably to protect Emily. Then, Emily was told to abandon childcare and household chores on weekdays and dump the kids on me. As she obeyed from being threatened as usual, I set up a daycare room in my office. She said she had never felt such despair. Even though she blamed herself, to her, it seemed as if even I was trying to distance myself from her children. And then one day, my father-in-law assaulted her. Despite placing a large package in front of the door and doing her best to defend, it was in vain. Just when she was about to give up, Susan, who had sensed something was wrong, entered the room. From then on, my wife had Susan stay in the same room, and she somehow managed to protect herself. The day I went to the scene of a quarrel between my father-in-law and Susan, it seemed her sister was urging her father to release Emily already. Of course, her father got angry and a fight ensued. And then I showed up. When we got home that day, she was overwhelmed with my accepting kindness, and at the same time sensed that I had heard something from Susan. She was grateful to be accepted for who she is, and for our sons who always enjoyed the meals she cooked. Many times, she found herself crying in secret. She sincerely wished to always stay here. We spent all night talking and crying together. When our boys woke up the next morning, they seemed shocked, saying, "Dad, don't bully Mom!" Emily started crying all over again, and I joined her. Our sons didn't understand and ended up crying too. We explained that we weren't fighting, but we were just deeply moved. We took the day off work that day and spent a relaxing time as a family. Then I made up my mind and contacted Susan. Surprisingly, all I had to do afterward was leave everything to her. She had not only learned about my father-in-law's unreasonable plans to live with us, but also had evidence of his embezzlement at work. She reported it, and he was arrested. It was reported in the local section of the national newspapers, which eventually led to Emily's parents getting divorced. Thanks to the lawyer that Susan hired, Emily's mother got a hefty amount of alimony and went back to her hometown. Emily's father did not go to prison, but lost everything. At first, he tried to rely on relatives, but nobody would help him when he demanded assistance with his condescending attitude. As a result, he seems to have retreated to some rural area. After that, Emily, the kids, and I lived peacefully. I think we were a very close-knit family, but unfortunately, our happiness only lasted a few years. Emily passed away in an accident. I was devastated for a while, but with the support of those around me, I managed to pull myself together after about a year. During that time, I caused some inconvenience to my business partners, but I somehow worked my way back, and now I'm doing very well, even employing a few people. One of them is a son of one of my business partners who persuaded other partners to help me out because I was struggling, and he kept my business connections intact. I was truly helped by those around me. Another one is Susan, Emily's sister. She helped me in many ways, and now, after losing her job partly because of that, she is working for me as a secretary. And now, she is dating one of my staff members, and they've both approached me to discuss the possibility of getting married. I'm thinking of celebrating this with my sons, who Emily left behind. The other day, I received a letter from Emily's father. The content was all over the place, but to summarize, it said, "I can come live with you if you want, and send me compensation and travel expenses right away because I'm coming over." So I immediately had my lawyer send him a warning. At the beginning of the letter, he even apologized, saying, "I was wrong at that time." But he always sends a letter around the anniversary of Emily's death, saying, "It's been a long time now, so the statute of limitations must have expired, right?" He's probably still aiming for my earning. I'm aware that he's in a tough situation and is ostracized by his neighbors because of his bragging. Once our sons grow old enough, I think it's time to settle this myself. Of course, I won't break the law, but I need to show him a further taste of hell. Until then, every time I remember this man, I'm fueled to work harder and get a greater revenge at him. Emily must have had a tough time growing up, being abused by her father since young. Despite having her sister and me to protect her, the fact that she couldn't escape from her father's control might suggest that she was practically brainwashed. Sadly, she passed away early, but I believe that she had a happy time in her last few years, as she was able to decisively break away from her father and live peacefully with our children. I am nothing but grateful to Emily's sister, who gave me the opportunity to save Emily, and I want her to be happy for Emily's sake from now on.